Okay, so welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast, Tom Joly.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Awesome, thanks for coming on, mate. And I haven't pronounced your name wrong, have I?
It's the correct pronunciation is Joly because
Oh,
it's
Joly. I have got
Joly
it
de Lotbinière. It's a
right.
French surname, but for obvious reasons, Tom Joly is
Yeah.
much easier.
For us simpleton English people, yeah. So
Yeah,
what's the history behind that your family lineage then?
it's French Canadian. So Lotbinière is from Canada, and the Joly name is from France a few hundred years ago or so.
Wow, awesome. So you are not in France at the minute. Where are you at the moment?
So I'm based in Sierra Nevada in the south of Spain. So lovely weather here. Normally used to be based in the UK. So French name, English, living in Spain.
And as you just mentioned before I hit record, you've there's something going on right outside your door.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it doesn't disturb the audio. It's the almond harvest at the moment. So the locals literally have their machines husking almonds in the streets outside. It makes a terrible racket.
Amazing. So we used to things like cats and dogs and internet connections interrupting the podcast. So this it'll be a first if it's interrupted by husking of almonds.
There's dogs and cats and all sorts as well. So you've got it all.
Amazing. So the reason we're talking then, we have a mutual friend through Kate Allen at Run Ultra, and obviously, the big story that I want to talk about is your awesome placing at UTMB. So you were, if I get this right, 16th.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so highest place in Brit. So, congratulations for you on that. And I want to talk all about that. But firstly, what I always do is sort of ask the question of any guest that comes on that your sort of backstory in running and how you got into running. You can go back as far as you like, give as much detail, as little detail as you like, and just sort of say how you've got to the point where you are now in running.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose it's a fairly long journey, even though I've sort of only recently really doubled down on ultra running. But about, gosh, almost 10 years ago now, left university, had squandered my years, didn't do any work, just drinking and smoking loads and generally not very healthy. And thought I need to, get life back on track. And wanted to join the army. So I thought I need to get fit, signed up to an Ironman, had no idea what I was sort of getting into. Um, Horrendous experience, did Ironman Wales as like my first ever, like I'd never done like a 10K or a marathon or, really ridden a bike much. So it was kind of baptism of fire. Um, and then kind of like, as you do, you either do one and you never do another one again, or you get the bug and keep on doing them. So I did another one before I joined the army. Did Went to Sandhurst, commissioned into Scots Guards. Didn't really get much of a chance to do triathlon or events while I was in, but obviously you do a lot of training with big weight on your back, being in infantry and things. So built up that sort of strength and fitness there. And I did a lot of Nordic skiing, which was great because I really got that feel for what it might be like to be a professional athlete. Um, and as triathlon was my first sort of foray into endurance, I got this idea like maybe I could be a pro triathlete. Wanted to go to Kona and try and become a professional Ironman. Soon realized that probably was unrealistic just because my swim and bike were not at the correct standard, but signed up to an ultra with one of the other officers and came fifth. And it wasn't like a really competitive race, but I was kind of surprised that I had this ability just to keep on going. And that kind of led me down the sort of ultra route. And I thought, oh, maybe professional running could be the way to go. And so I decided to leave the army then and try and focus on that side of the sport. Went into a civilian job for 3 years to save up some money, and then I used everything I'd like saved to buy this place in Spain where I am now. And then last year I left the day job and committed full time as like a full time athlete. That's where I am now.
So you've gone all in on ultra running then, basically, haven't you?
Yeah, all in. I went to Kona last year to the Ironman World Championships, and like even training full time, like I was still just so far off the top guys. So that was the final nail on the coffin on the triathlon saga.
It's interesting because so I had my sort of first foray into endurance was with through triathlon many years ago. I think the first one, the usual things like convinced by a mate in a pub that this is a good idea. Let's do a triathlon, and we did Bala in Wales. So in my naivety, I trained for all of this. Bike was fine, running was okay. Swimming, yeah, just go and swim in the local swimming pool and get my training in that way. It was kind of like an afterthought. And then actually on the day, I'd never swam in a wetsuit before, so all the usual failings and trappings of your first triathlon. And I wore a shorty, and the water, it was so rough that there was like white horses on top of the
Yeah.
wave coming in, and me thinking it's not a sea swim, it's just literally swimming in a lake. And I was dead last in my heat on the swim, and my wetsuit came undone. It started filling with water. I thought I was going to drown. So basically, it was an absolute disaster. And then I eventually like sorted it out, became a half decent swimmer through lots of YouTube tutorials on technique, and rather than thrashing around in the water, becoming efficient and gliding. And then started to enjoy it, and then eventually worked my way up to I didn't do an Ironman event, but I did the full distance, the Outlaw in Nottingham. I did that twice, and I realised that I did it one year, and then the next year I did it, and I not 10 minutes off. And I thought, over such a massive distance of all those events, just knocking 10 minutes off, really, I've kind of wasted a lot of time putting energy into that. And I was thinking, by that point, I got kids and they were sort of growing up, and wondering I was when I was training for it. And I thought, right, I need to focus on one sport. I loved cycling, but the best bang for your buck is obviously running, isn't it? So that was my introduction to running, and obviously from then I ended up going into marathons and ultras and everything like that. But how do you feel now, looking back on your triathlon sort of half career? Do you feel like you could have stuck at it and for a few more years and probably got to the point where you needed to be, or was it like a solid decision that no, I'm done with that, I'm going to focus on running?
It's a good question, because I think if I'd continued 4 years of hard training doing bike and swim instead of going into the military, then I could have got onto like that progression curve. But given all I really did was running in the army, my running continued to improve, and the other two just fell behind so far. It would take a good few years just to catch up. And generally, like, I don't know if you've just seen the last Ironman World Champs, Jan Frodeno is going out at the age of 40, which is pretty good going. But as with cycling at the moment, like the trend is going towards those younger and younger guys. Whereas at least in ultra running, there's still a lot of guys who are still competitive into their 40s, particularly at the longer distances. So as a career, I kind of realized like the window is closing pretty rapidly on that side of things. And it was really because of COVID I stuck at it, because I qualified in 2019 for Kona, but because of that I didn't get to go until 2022. So it kind of just put a bit of a handbrake on my ultra running. Not that, like, I look at it now and go, are those years wasted? And not at all, because the time I put in on the bike built that like aerobic foundation, and like I still do a lot of cycling now. and it's great, obviously, for cross training. So it was definitely, I think, part of the process in getting to where I am now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, building that engine. So sort of talking about like recent races then, how have things gone for you as far as you know, the races that you did qualify to do UTMB and stuff like that? What success have you sort of found yourself having in running?
So last year, sort of focused on races I thought I could win, and sort of, I guess, building the confidence.
Mm.
So won Ultra Sierra Nevada out here, which is a fairly competitive 100K, and the Ultra X World Championships in Slovenia, which is a 250K 5-day multi-day. And then qualified at Doi Inthanon, Thailand, the 100 miler in December last year. I was probably the fittest I'd ever been, and I picked up COVID on the journey out. And so it was a pretty rough race, particularly for your first 100 miler. I was sort of, my heart rate was so elevated. It was like I was breathing through my nose at 170 beats per minute. So I'm like, this should be easy, but like, it's like there's something is not like it's not right. And that actually put me in a bit of a hole. But I came sixth, and because it's a major, I got my qualification, elite qualification to UTMB that way. But that did take some time to come back from. So I was kind of surprised this year because I did Trans Gran Canaria 80K in February or at the start of this year and came third. And that actually qualified me for the GB team for the World Champs in Austria this year. So that was like probably the highlight for me. I remember being just like over the moon, getting that first GB vest. That was like a real defining moment this year. And then the World Champs themselves went pretty well. I did a big block at altitude beforehand, and again was like really, really fit. But as you see with all these top guys, when you get to that level of fitness, you just open yourself up to bugs and illness and things. And again, like the recovery after the World Champs was really slow. I'll boast myself and say again I was top Brit there, and 11th in the 85K distance. And it was an insane race. Like the depth of field meant there was only 8 minutes between me and fourth place. So like even towards the last climb of the race, there's like 4 or 5 guys. I had Zach Miller just in front of me, just battling it out the whole time to the finish. So that was really cool. And then UTMB, obviously, which we just had the other day. So I don't know where you want to start with that. There's a lot to talk about there.
No, that's amazing. How do you going back to Thailand? I've been to Thailand and I've tried to run in Thailand anyway, and imagine that it's tough. So do you feel like the environment that you're in now in southern Spain is that sort of setting you up for being able to do? I know obviously you had COVID, but under normal circumstances, being that fit, do you feel like how do you feel that race should have gone then if you came sixth with COVID?
Yeah, I feel like I was going in, and because I'd just come off of the Ironman World Championships, I'd done a huge amount of cycling, and then I'd done a 6-week block of just pure running. I was doing like 200K a week with 10,000 meters of vert. I didn't even feel tired off of like that block at all. So I was going in super confident, definitely going for the podium, if not for the win. The problem is I just didn't adjust my expectations with the sickness. So you've got to adjust your plan basically if you're not feeling up to it. I was up in second place until about 100K, as if I was still trying to go for the win, and then just blew up spectacularly. And yeah, blowing up when you've got 60K left to run in a 100-mile race is pretty unpleasant.
That's harsh. Wow, yeah, amazing. So coming forward then in time to UTMB then. So how did your sort of preparation go into that then? So had you sort of done any really mountainous stuff like that before?
I suppose Thailand itself, again, it's like a 10,000 meters of a race. Um, and it did the Bob Graham round last year. And then again at World Champs, it was a lot of vert, even though it was only 85K. So that wasn't too much. I didn't feel too daunted by the course itself. Um, the big issue actually I had was I I thought it was long COVID that I've been suffering from this year. It turns out I'm just intolerant to dairy. And so the weeks after World Champs, I was trying to gain weight back, and I was doing it by smashing like whey protein drinks and eating milk chocolate. So I was like, I don't understand why I feel so rubbish, just like stuffing Milka bar after Milka bar down my throat. And the guys, I joined Innovate for a few months this year, and a couple of guys I was training with were both vegan on the team, and they went, "Well, why don't you just cut out the dairy, like see what happens?" And so, like 3 weeks before UTMB, just cut out the dairy, and all of a sudden, like HRV just went straight back up to the best it's ever been. Resting heart rate came down 10 beats, and I was like, I started sleeping better. Everything just clicked, and I was like, oh, can't believe it. So actually, in terms of prep for UTMB, was terrible, and I managed to put together like 4 good weeks of training in the last 5 weeks before the race. So we did a loop of the mountain, or wrecking the course. Then we did the TDS recce as well after that for just extra training, which is a beautiful course and actually much more trail, I'd say, than the UTMB course. So actually, it's probably one of the worst preparations I've done, but I got to the I got to the start line feeling healthy for UTMB, and I think that's basically, with the years of training I put in, as long as you're healthy, you've got that base fitness, and you can still get around in a fairly decent time. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, do you miss dairy?
Yeah. It's definitely addictive. Like people talk about it, like so many things. I'd rather give up like meat and eggs and like
Mm.
anything else, but you just keep in dairy. It's delicious. Don't know how people live without it.
No. Well, have you read anything into because I know I've done loads of research into stuff like this to do with having raw dairy and reintroducing. So if you've cut dairy out and you feel better for it, reintroducing raw dairy that has all of the sort of microbes in and everything in that hasn't been zapped, and build it, and that can build up your tolerance back to dairy again. If it's something that you feel like you're
Yeah,
desperate to return
it's
to.
interesting you say that. I had food poisoning actually earlier this year as well, and had to go on antibiotics after like a month because it wasn't going. And the only dairy I was eating at the time was kefir. So I think that's that sort of raw dairy, and it has the bacteria, which, and at the time I was actually feeling fine. Once I went on the antibiotics, it obviously wiped out that whole gut biome thing. And I think actually since then, that's when it actually was a lot worse. But compared to how I feel now, you're like, I'm just happy. I just never
Yeah,
eat dairy again.
yeah,
It's a small sacrifice really in the long term, but huge
yeah. That's
benefits.
it. Yeah, I suppose if you've got your goals for where you want to take your running, then if somebody said to you, you can't have Milka ever again, or cheese. I don't know. I think I'd still struggle with it.
The problem is on like races, because like one of the
Yeah.
aid stations at UTMB, it was like cheese, then it was like butter flapjacks, and then it's like some bars which have like lactose in. You're like, well, I can't eat any of this. Like, I'll just take a little bit of banana. That's all I can eat.
Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. European races are very different, aren't they, to like US races and
Yeah.
British race ultras are just like I've heard somebody say that aid stations are like a chav's picnic.
Yeah, I mean they were elite. I don't know if you saw any of the footage of like the guys with like the cheese knives
Yeah,
at
yeah.
UTMB, like literally cutting up the huge, like massive cheeses. It was just bizarre. The
Mm.
Americans were loving it.
Not ideal if you got a dairy intolerance, obviously.
No.
So how did sort of I've not been to UTMB, and every year I kick myself thinking that, I need to get out there, convince the family that, we need to go and tour the Alps during August. And I think it will happen this next year, with plans to get rid of the caravan and have a camper van. This is going to be our goal for next year, is to be there. But could sort of, if anyone's not been there before, I haven't been there before, can you sort of describe, because they say it's like the greatest show on earth, don't they? Like the hype of UTMB and what it's like to be there that week.
Yeah, I was going in after World Champs thinking like, wow, that was the most sort of crazy trail race I've ever done, with like the spectators and support and stuff. And then UTMB was just another level. Like Chamonix is obviously busy at that time of year anyway, and then it just, the week before the race, it's just like there is literally, when people say there's a buzz in the air, you can like literally hear like just the chit chat and patter of feet on the street, and everyone just like looking around. There's pros everywhere, all the big names are there, and the support on the course was nuts. Like from Le Contamine, you go up Notre Dame de la Gorge, and it was just like, Tour de France climb, Alpe d'Huez style, just screaming fans and cowbells. And then even like through the high peaks and things, there were people out on the course. And the next morning we got to Col de Forclaz as well, near Triance. And again, like everyone, like the fans were just out in force. There's a guy with like a chainsaw without the blade on, just like running behind you, loudspeakers, or like smoke going off in your face. Like it was crazy. And I had the misfortune of having Courtney behind me all the way for the first 100 kilometers. She was literally within earshot or eyesight
No
for the
way.
entire first 100K of the race. So obviously the fans ahead of me were all getting like
Yeah,
properly
revved
roused up, and yeah. So yeah, you've got to go. Like yeah, there's no other race like it, and I think this year being the 20-year anniversary, plus the whole Courtney thing, plus the depth of the field, like it was just insane, and it'll probably be like that, every year now.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I saw. So we were on holiday down in Dorset, and I kept sneaking away to get my phone and get like the live footage on and everything. And I was watching during Courtney while she was going up some of those sections where literally it's bad when it's the Tour de France and people are sort of stood in front of you as you're trying to bike through. But it seemed like it was worse. Like people were literally like stood in front of her. She's trying to get through, and she's really polite. Obviously, she's such a humble person. I'd have been like, get out of the way, come on, shift. Did it feel like that? Did it feel like the
There was a lot of that, yeah. Like literally, I was running through, and you're just hitting onto people. There's guys shoving you from behind. Jim did a good post. There's like a kind of "Where's Wally?" but "Where's Jim?" post, because you see him going into the crowd, and then he's just gone. He's disappeared. You can't see him.
Amazing. That's so cool. So did you sort of, you said talk about the buzz there and everything, seeing pros. Did you feel like a bit of a fanboy yourself with you running idols there?
Yeah, big time. I get that a lot because the first time I experienced it was in Kona, and then again at World Champs. It's almost like your Instagram feed has come to life, and you're just like, you're not sure if you're in the real world or not. Um, but at the same time, now I have a good feel, like I'm knocking on the door of top 10 at Worlds and at UTMB. That actually, luckily this year, like no one knows who I am. Maybe next year, a few people might recognize me, but I'm not turning heads yet in the same way. So for me, it's that perfect balance. I get to be with the big names, but at the same time, sort of blend in and hide away from everyone.
Yeah, you get to be stealth for a short time until everybody knows who you are, and then you won't be able to
Yeah,
hide who you are.
yeah,
That's pretty cool that you can sort of, you running in the depth of field that you've got out there, running in front of Courtney. It's got, how do you feel like, this is where you belong to be, like top 10 going for it?
yeah, definitely. It's like I think a lot of runners, particularly introverted, like ultra runners, they struggle with that whole imposter syndrome
Mm.
thing, particularly like so two years ago my index was down at 700. I'm a good amateur, and now you're trying to compete with the big boys, and there is that like adjustment period where you pinch yourself because you don't believe it yourself. But then as that sort of sinks in and your confidence builds, you realize like, no, I've put the work in, like I deserve to be here. This is like, you don't get many opportunities and chances, so you've got to make the most of it. And really, it's what you tell yourself. Like if you think to yourself, no, I can compete with these guys, you generally can. If you feel like you're lost and these guys are going to destroy you, then that mindset it sort of reinforces itself.
Yeah. So have you done any sort of work with, I'm trying to think of the word now, sports psychology type stuff where you're sort of, people talk about sort of running the race through in your mind and everything and then seeing the finish line. Is that part of your preparation for big races like that?
It is now. Like, so I've also joined a team, plugging here, Team L7, this year. And we did a training camp in Argentière a month or so before UTMB. And one of the members of the team is a business psychologist, sort of psychiatrist. She does that kind of work. And it's the first time I've ever done any of the mental side of it, and actually found it really productive and useful, particularly on those. It sounds like it's very common amongst other runners to have those same feelings of doubt and worry. And I think it's the same, I guess, for anyone, when you're at the start line of a big race and you look around and it's impossible not to feel a bit intimidated. But yeah, so that has actually recently become part of my practice in race preparation now.
Yeah, because running ultras, you'll know half of it is in your head. And anyway, like fitness will get you so far, but you can have two similar runners with similar training going into a race, and sometimes it comes down to who wants it more on the day, that kind of thing. So I think people preparing for races now, it seems to be, the more pros I talk to and the more people that like yourself, that are, focused on doing really well at a top level, it has to be part of your preparation, doesn't it? So do you think that is this something that's coming into all people sort of vying for the top places, or do you think there's still people out there that don't focus on the mental game? Sure.
I think a lot of people don't focus on the mental game. I think it's actually quite hard, mostly because we all have your ego is the protective part of your psychology. It doesn't like to suffer pain or embarrassment or admit that it's weak. And so when you actually dig into your psychology and realize all these flaws you have, is one, you've got to recognize them, but two, you have to accept them. And that's the hardest part. And actually, I'd say a lot of the other athletes on the Team L7 camp, when we did these sessions, they were actually quite unreceptive to the sessions. And I think that's just, like I say, it's that protective function of your ego. It doesn't want to change. We like the way things are. People don't like to have to admit that they're wrong or weak.
Yeah, we're creatures of habit, aren't we?
Creatures of habit, exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of, if you've trained, especially if you've been successful at what you've done already without psychology, then you can see how people would sort of resist it a little bit. Do you feel like that's going to be your sort of superpower going forward, that you've accepted these, this kind of training, and you feel like it's going to put you at a greater advantage than some of your teammates, do you think?
No, I don't think it's a superpower. Like, I think the gains are relatively marginal. Like, I still think it comes down to the person with the biggest engine and the best physiological traits. I think the mental and the physical, they develop in accordance with one another. So when you're fitter, you can go harder and for longer, and you might think, I'm mentally stronger.
Yeah,
but like you're not going to see a psychologist winning UTMB just because they've conquered all their demons in their mind. It's still a physical race at the end of the day.
That is very true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell me about the setup with Team Hour 7 then. How does that work? Are they one of the only, like professional teams to have been set up? I know I have heard what's his name, the guy who runs it.
Mike Stocks, Michael Stocks.
Yes, I've heard him interviewed before. And in fact, I think I'm booking him in next week to talk to him
Oh,
as well.
nice.
So how does that team work then, as far as like day to day?
Yeah, it's quite cool. Like you say, it's one of the, well, as far as I heard this podcast about them and was like, wow, that's cool. Like a private team trying to go, I think, the same way as, say, like a professional cycling team. And I
Yeah.
know Mike has talked about getting big sponsors on board, um, so that eventually they can pay like progressing elite athletes to make that jump
Mm.
between the sort of elite to professional level. And I mean, we did an amazing training camp in Argentia for a week. They provide sports nutrition through SIS, who's now one of the sort of backers, sponsors of the team. And Say Sky provide the kits. So we had massage on the camp, we had psychology, we did lactate testing with Jamie Pugh, and Robbie Britton is the athlete manager. So we have these like really, like I'm talking to Robbie for a race debrief on Monday. Like you've got all these resources available to us that probably only like the top elite teams really get. I know
Mm.
Adidas Terex, I think they've just taken on a sports psychologist. So that gives you an idea of like the level of
Mm.
where Team Hour 7 is already compared to some of the bigger, well-known teams.
Yeah, I would have thought that they would have been sort of onto that way before now. Yeah, Adidas. Correct. So it's interesting you mentioned Robbie Britton. I've interviewed Robbie. He's a real character, isn't he, Robbie?
He's a
He's
real
a
character.
yeah. He told me off actually afterwards, after I interviewed him, because at the time he was going through a phase of, I don't know if he still is, of trying to be vegetarian, and I used that as like the title of the podcast, and he told me off and said it was too clickbaity, and made me
I
change it.
don't, I get that all the time. I'm always in trouble with Robbie for like tagging things I shouldn't be tagging in posts,
Yeah.
or yeah, saying the wrong
Yeah,
thing.
he's a great guy, and I was like, fair enough. It's your interview. You can call it however you want. Yeah, great. So you've got that sort of support from, from real experienced elite ultra runners already. So what have you sort of gained as far as like things rubbing off on you from them? How does that work?
I think the big one is, yeah, like the experience, particularly from Robbie. Like we did some lactate testing on the camp where I wasn't very fit, but at the same time, it highlighted the reason I'm suffering from cramp in races. The reason I'm blowing up is because I'm just going out too hard on the first few climbs. Um, that was a big help. And then Robbie was actually out on the course for UTMB. He was crewing for Dan Jones, and he kind of, I think he laughed at me at the first man checkpoint. Maybe he wasn't expecting me to be there because I was still like, I think I was in 40th by about then, which is still quite high up in the fields at that point. And then surprised to see me, I think, in Courmayeur. And again, then at Champay-Lac, he started going like, he was giving me this really good advice, which was, don't chase the guys in front of you, just keep moving well. And so, yeah, in terms of like training, I'm self-coached and always have been. So it's more it's all the extra little bits on top, and just having that experienced group of people that you can call basically any time and chat about races or training or whatever.
Yeah, because so Jamie Pugh. So is that precision hydration? Is that?
I think Robbie and him may work with them separately. I think Jamie's got his fingers in a lot of different studies and lectures at Leeds University, I think. and has like a lab up there, and can do all the VO2 lab testing stuff that and heat training. I know. I think Hayden Hawks went
Yeah.
up there to do some testing before Western States with them.
Yes, he's definitely involved with because I'm on the mailing list for precision hydration, so I'd seen stuff come through about Robbie and Hayden Hawks. In fact, I was at Western States last year and running with a follow cam on the last section down to like from Roby Point down to the finish, and I saw Robbie, and I didn't realize who he was at the time because he was running with Hayden Hawks down to the finish.
Yes.
And then once I interviewed him after that, I realised that we'd seen each other before, and he was like the only other English person that I'd seen while I was there.
It would be interesting when you do go to Chamonix to the comparison between Western and Chamonix, because like the coverage obviously is limited, so it's hard to get an idea of like what it's actually like. It's a race I'd like to do for sure.
Yeah, it's a great race. And the times I've been to Chamonix many times over the years, but it's purely like my previous incarnation was as a snowboarder. So since the age of 15, something. So from like I was an early adopter from me and a few mates from like 1995, I think was the first 95, 96, the first year we went away snowboarding. And for some reason, Chamonix just seemed to be a place that we always ended up going. So I know, when I hear all the names of where all the checkpoints are and everything, I'm like, I know those points on the mountain because I've snowboarded all around there. So it's like, I feel like I kind of know UTMB without actually going. But obviously, I want to go and experience that for myself. So you say the Western States. Do you think is that sort of something that you've decided you want to target in the next couple of years?
Yeah, if I can get a golden ticket, basically. So I think a lot will depend on that. But definitely, like the American trail running scene is huge. So Western States, Hard Rock are definitely on the list on the American side. But it's just like these 100 miles are big commitments, and as we saw like this year, if you want to do Western, you're probably not really going to be able to do UTMB. Okay, forget Courtney. But if you want to do Hard Rock, you're probably not going to be able to do UTMB. Forget Killian. Realistically, for mere mortals to fully peak and then perform at more than one of these races in a year is a big ask.
Even Jim couldn't do it, could he?
No, even Jim couldn't crack it. And look how long it's taken him to move from that sort of slightly faster, hotter racing style to the more alpinist at UTMB. It's taken him years. It's not just one season to the next.
Yeah, literally, it was I had interviewed, and he was saying how it was a 2-year plan for him to sort of get over there, but then he had that same approach to Western States, didn't he? That he failed on a couple of occasions, didn't he? With his taking the wrong turn and everything, and but eventually he cracked the code, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? If you want to do really, really well at a race, you've got to fully commit to it and figure that race out, figure out the all the things that you've got to change in your own, style of running and things like that. Where do you sort of see your speciality now, and do you think that's going to change in the future?
I think my speciality, like most of the races I've done, have been around that 100-kilometer category mark. And I finished UTMB and I was like, that maybe the 100 miles just not for me. Maybe I'll do CCC next year. And the reason I'm good at the 100K distance is because I've done lots of the 100K distance. And if you want to get good at 100 miles, like there's only one way to do it, and that's to race at the 100-mile distance loads, because that's how you learn, that's how you get better. So immediately erased that from the record, and we'll be going for UTMB again. I think the more technical terrain and generally actually harder conditions races suit me better. So again, like that military experience when you're not sleeping and you're living, out of a rucksack for 2 weeks at a time, you learn to you get good at suffering and being uncomfortable. I really hope one year, at UTMB, we get a really bad weather year. And I feel like that would be a good opportunity, particularly for the Brits in general, to perform really well. So far, the last, since 2017, I think that was the last time they shortened the course because of bad weather. But generally now it's becoming more and more of a good weather, like the last 2 years in particular. Like we had some fog this year, but apart from that, it was warm. It was clear skies and like fast running conditions. And I think that suits the Americans, the Wormsleys, better. And when we get a really nasty weather year, I think that's when like the Killians, the alpinists, but then also like the rugged fell runners and Brits and things will have their moment.
Yeah, that's what we're good at, isn't it? Suffering in the rain.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the super lean athletes who are fitter than you. As soon as you give it a rain and cold, they'll melt.
Absolutely. So sort of just thinking, just going back a second to Western States, have you sort of made a plan as far as because you mentioned a golden ticket, so have you looked into that already? Then what races you could possibly do to get a golden ticket then?
Thailand was one last year, so I had sort of fingers crossed, but that obviously didn't go to plan. But no, for me at the moment, my two main ambitions are the Trail World Championships. Like winning a medal for GB would be a great feather in the cap, and then getting on the podium at UTMB. So like for me, those are the two main goals. And if I can get to Western States and Hard Rock and these other races and fit them into a season, then that's great. But they are secondary goals along the way.
Yeah, awesome. So as far as like bucket list races, is there anything that of sort of the, and obviously Western States and UTMB, is there any of the races that sort of have caught your eye that you kind of thinking, oh, I'll put that on the back burner for now, but ultimately I want to get back to that race and do that race?
There's so many. I suppose I quite like a lot of the European and Spanish races with lots of vert, Valderan and Trail Andorra are definitely two I'd like to do in Spain. Oh, and Transvolcania. What are the other big Spanish ones? And then maybe in the future, like towards the end of the career, as you start slowing down, maybe do like the Tour de Jean or maybe the PTL. See how those really, really long races fare. But there's I'm sure you're the same. There's 20 races you want to do every season, and then you write them down and then never get around to actually going to them.
Yeah, well, I'm at that point now of slowing down and wanting to do longer stuff. So for many years, I kind of put off doing 100 milers and just stuck to sort of 50K to 50 mile, and then 100Ks was sort of my limit. And then a few years of on-off injuries and training sort of taking a bit of a nosedive from where it used to be. I figured, I'm 40, so 43. Yeah, 43. I'll get this wrong. Now my focus is starting to go longer, slower but longer. So I'm in for the winter spine race. I'm doing that.
Oh, cool. I was listening to your interview this morning with Damien Hall.
Yes.
And his success at the spine. And he's about the same age, isn't he?
Yeah, he's in his 40s. He might be a little bit older, I think.
Yeah, see, you're fine. You got loads of time.
Yeah, well, I always think of Jeff Browning, and he is 50 now, into Jeff Browning,
Wow.
Bronco Billy. Big, I saw a post from him today, and he's doing his third 100 miler for the year this year. Wasatch just done Wasatch 100, and he's still winning, he's still podiuming at
Yeah.
100 and stuff. And
I think Carl Metzler, the American, is going for 100 hundreds.
Yeah.
as his like long-term ambition. I mean, he's done a lot of long races, but he must be getting close to that 50 mark, I think,
Yeah,
as
I think
well.
he might even be older than that. Yeah.
Older, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that with the famous. Is he the one with the famous quote that where he says 100 miles is not that far?
Yeah, probably because he's done like the
Not
Pacific
that
Crest
many.
Trail and like yeah, all these ridiculously long trails.
It's so how old are you if you don't mind me asking?
32.
32. Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
you're like prime age for racing, bigger races, not massively long races, but the you've still got youth on your side as far as being able to still have your speed over those longer distances.
Yeah, I think so. Like I'm noticing the speed is starting to go. So like sessions that I used to do, it's weird. You get slower on the reps, but actually overall in racing you're getting faster. So it's just that like speed endurance and like energy management. Like you get so much better at just holding that constant high effort rather than like being able to go really, really fast. Um, but yeah, 32, I reckon I've got 8 good years. And like that's what I've set out in terms of like my big plan is like keep this going for another 8 years if I can. And if Salomon or whoever aren't paying your pension by then go back to the real world and maybe try, just getting a normal job, and at least you've given it a go.
Who's the friend? There's a French runner in there he's 48. What's his name?
Ludovic.
Ludovic. That's
Uh, yeah, yeah. I was with him for a lot of the race in
wow.
UTMB, and he's so strong.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you saw the footage at the start of the race. Everyone goes off like crazy. Ludovic runs to the front of the race, overtakes Pau Capel, and then he pulls over to the side of the road and starts applauding all the other runners coming through. It's absolute classic. So I saw him; he came whizzing past me. I was like,
Yeah.
"Bloody hell, Ludovic's going for it!"
Mm.
And then the next thing I know, I'm overtaking him. But we ran together for a lot of the course until we hit the fog in Col de la Seine, and then he just took off. He just disappeared into the night. Um, but yeah, he did 21 hours, and obviously he's won the race and
Yeah.
won GDS last year, which just shows like if you stick at it, you
Mm.
can do amazing things.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, age is just a number. In fact,
Just a number.
I interviewed this week the youngest person to complete the Dragon's Back. So Owen Jackson, 20 years old, and
20.
yeah, he's 20 and he got through the Dragon's Back and he came 23rd out of 300 and something people. I think actually the rate of attrition was quite high with that race because of the heat and everything. I think only like 80 something people actually finished that. And I was saying to him, I'm old enough to be his dad.
Yeah.
I've been running as long as he's been alive. But I was just saying, when I was 20, I wasn't, doing multi-stage ultras. Do
No.
you think this just like you were talking about recycling and everything, everyone getting younger and younger? Do you think this is just a natural progression of our sport that people are going to start? Because it used to be a middle-aged, middle-class white person sport into ultra running, and to some extent, it's still like that, especially on the sort of low, the non-professional side of things. Do you think that the tide is changing with that kind of thing now?
Yeah, definitely. I think trail running is and ultra running is probably at least 30 years behind where cycling is. And it's probably, I'd say, about 5 years now behind where triathlon is, maybe 5 to 10, that sort of area. Um, but like the guy who won the world champs this year, Benjamin Rubio, I think is 23. And it's no longer, it's just the start of that era now where it's not triathletes, cyclists, and Nordic skiers coming over to trail because they can't make the Olympics or whatever. And so they're switching sports. It's now guys who are growing up as trail runners. They do skiing in the winter, but actually their sole focus is on the trails. So I think there will be more of the Benjamin Rubios, more of the Killians coming through in the next 5, 10 years. So if you're a mere mortal like yourself and I, who are just like dedicated to the training, like you got to get on board now because in 10 years' time, the sport will be professionalized, and it will be these young guys coming through who already have the stamina and like experience of like 30, 40-year-olds now.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, to think how the sport can change in such a. And we always say it's like a rapid change, and it's the fastest growing sport, and you hear that a lot about other sports, don't you, as well? But I mean, it can only be a good thing, can't it? The younger people getting into the sport, getting faster, making it more professional, which means more money coming into the sport, which means greater exposure. Basically, it's good for everybody, isn't it? That kind of thing.
Good for everybody except for the electric car drivers. Obviously, quite controversial. Uh,
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing. Like, yeah, it's professionalization of sport. Like, you
Yeah.
can't have it both ways.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and you can, drive. You can drive to a race in an electric car, can't you?
Yeah, you can. I don't know where you charge it on the way to Chamonix. You probably get stuck halfway
Yeah,
up the valley.
you
But
need
yeah,
a diesel car for that, unfortunately. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's interesting that I was going to talk to Kate from Run Ultra and have this conversation about all that controversy that did you did you even notice any of that while you were there? There were people talking about it.
a lot of people talking about it. Like,
Mm.
you could hear people on the street talking about it. There were 30 Dacia cars, I guess, on loan to UTMB, so they're driving around. So you're never, and obviously the branding and logos are everywhere. It was quite, there was a lot of pros talking about it and being
Mm.
like, this isn't good for the sports and stuff. But at the same time, they're standing there in their oil-based, plastic clothing, with their sponsor's name on it,
Yeah,
who, putting up huge amounts of money in the same way. And like,
yeah.
it was just quite hypocritical, I think, from a lot of people who don't want to boycott the race, but at the same time are criticizing UTMB for doing what we want them to do.
It's an awkward, juxtaposition to be in, isn't it? Because I know Damien Hall, he sort of like openly calls himself like a hypocrite, doesn't he? When it comes to that kind of thing, that he knows that
Yeah,
he knows something that is you've got to professionalize the sport, more money will come in, but at the same time, people have got their values when it comes to
yeah,
that.
yeah. And like, he's like, at least he's taking a side and sticking to it. He's not going back to UTMB because he doesn't approve of it. I think for that reason. And he says, like, I'm only going to take one flight for the year. Okay, like, we're all living and breathing and consuming, we're all contributing, but there are things that you can do to, at least try and put a positive spin on it and try and reduce your output.
Yeah, I mean, as ultra runners, we tend to be pretty good on the carbon scale anyway, don't we? Because if you can, you'll run. I've for years I've always cycled and ran to work rather than.
I think it's a false economy. We tell ourselves that to feel better, but unless you're like, I studied zoology, and so did a lot of and did a climate change module. Like, unless you're not going to reproduce and have children, like, we're all hypocrites.
Too late. I've got two kids.
Yeah, it's too late. Yeah, you'll have to choose one. Unfortunately, tough
that's
decisions
that's
ahead.
that's China, isn't it? That's living in
No,
China.
that's China. Yeah, yeah. There, we should all take the Chinese approach. Good for them.
That's called communism.
Yeah, yeah. It's more
Anyway,
environmentally friendly. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
we don't tend to talk about politics on the podcast.
No,
Just
sorry, we're going
just,
way outside of,
just
yeah,
trolling.
off
Awesome.
script.
So as far as like you're concerned, then what's have you done for 2023, or have you got anything on the table?
Done. No, not yet. No, no. Now that I'm feeling better, I've got another race in Hong Kong. Sorry, long haul flight. In
Oh,
November. So the Translantau 140 to try and requalify for next year's UTMB.
awesome.
Um, and they very kindly invited me out there, which is quite cool. And the field, I looked at the 100K start list, and there's like no one of note on the 100K start list. And for some reason, everyone's gone in for the 100 milers. So two of the top Chinese Hoka athletes are going to be there. And then Greg Courmois, the French athlete who's quite a good 100 mile is going to be there. So I think just, there's no guarantees. Getting that top three will be quite tough.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm just being distracted by a fly flying in front of my camera. Visual effects. So how do you feel sort of going into that race then? Do you feel like if you got full confidence now you've come out of UTMB and you're feeling strong?
Yeah, much more confident. Because the recovery from UTMB has actually gone really well. And I think because I was well rested and paced it well and all that sort of things, like I'm not feeling as bad as I thought I would be. And 2 months now until the race in Hong Kong. So that's like, I don't need very long. If I can get 5-6 week decent block of training in, I can get very, very fit. And the weather here is perfect this time of year. So I'll be doing a lot on the bike and then probably quite a lot of speed work actually, because the course is basically super flat. And then you get these nasty, steep climbs of 600-700 meters of vert, and then a sort of 5K flat until the next one, or like relatively flat. So it's a very different race. And again, like the temperature here is warm, as we spoke about. So like I can still get in quite a lot of good heat prep before going out there.
So we didn't really touch on that point actually, the fact that you self-coached. How have you at any point sort of felt like you needed to get a coach, or have you just always felt like you know what you do, it works, that kind of thing?
Like I remember the first training program I ever wrote out, and I understood that like you need progressive overload. That was about the only training principle I inherently understood. So my program was like 10K today, 12K Tuesday, 14K Wednesday, and like by the end of the month I'll be running 40 or 50K or something. And obviously you can see the problem there. So it's been a learning experience. Like myself probably would have benefited from getting a coach early on, but then at the same time, now that I've sort of done the research and figured it out myself, there's a lot of freedom and like enjoyment in the process. So like last year I was like, I've got blank piece of paper, like let's see what happens. What if I do an entire block where I just do long runs every day? What if I do an entire block where it's like 3 threshold sessions a week? Or if I do an entire block which is like mostly bike with 50K of running a week? And so I've had like the flexibility and freedom to like test and see what works for me. And also like, yeah, self-coached, you lose that, what's the word? When someone is doing like the thinking for you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can be harsher on, like, people talk about their own thoughts. You're really harsh on yourself. With my own training, I can push myself probably harder than a sensible coach would. And I think that's what's allowed me to progress probably quicker. It's also why I probably got sick and injured a lot in the last year and a half. But at the same time, like if you're not pushing the envelope, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So there are definitely benefits there.
It's finding that balance into, they call it going out on the razor's edge, don't they? Like you're pushing yourself out, and it could go horribly wrong, but it can go absolutely amazingly right as well, can't it? So you've got to find your sort of your own balance point, haven't you?
Yeah, there's a good quote from Sebastian Kienle, the triathlete, on that, which I quite like, which is you're walking a thin line between fit and fucked, and you don't always know when the line is coming.
Yeah, and when it's one way or the other. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So for people to sort of follow you then in your progress, and looking forward to seeing how well you're going to do in Hong Kong and everything, and your future races. So do you want to direct people to anything in particular, like your social media or?
Please follow me. I have no followers on Instagram for some reason. I must be really ugly or just terrible at using Instagram, but it's a Tom Joly Ultra. So please follow there. Otherwise, I post about training and race reports on my website, which is called Athletium, which you can find athletium.com.
Brilliant.
But yeah, go to Instagram, you'll find everything there. Yeah,
I'll tag you in the show notes and everything, so people can sort of go to your website and go to your Instagram. You just need to do more runs with your shirt off, and then you'll get loads of followers.
It's funny you say that. That's what all the girls keep telling me. That's the content they want to see.
That's it. That's what everyone wants to see. Amazing.
Unfortunately, most of my followers are male based, according to Instagram. So maybe I should keep my shirt on.
No, some of them are like that too. So
Yeah, followers.
Got to keep them happy. Excellent.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. Appreciate you coming on and giving us some of your time. And it's great to sort of have an insight into your sort of mindset and your training and your goals for the future. And then, I'm sure that you're going to do great things in this sport.
Thanks very much, Sam. It was really good talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Cheers, mate.
Thanks. Bye.